All right, good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Paul Zahner. Just a little bit about myself. I am local here in the Philadelphia area, and I run a local Bitcoin meetup as well as Bitcoin 101 Zooms, kind of, answering questions. My passion is around Bitcoin education. And so I have the honor to run this panel today. We have amazing talent and knowledge here on the panel. So I'll spend a minute just to introduce everyone we have here just real quick for the sake of time. But the full bios, of course, are in your programs. All right, so we have Vinny Pardi. So Vinny started his career in electrical engineering after graduating from Purdue. In 2017, Vinny began studying and learning about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, started some home mining as well, and was hired by River Financial. So Vinny goes around and is in charge of operations for mining, finding facilities and setting them up, and running those. Next we have Lisa Hough. Lisa just gave a great talk next door for anyone who was there. So Lisa is the Vice President and Head of Business Development for Levelfield Financial. She previously was the Director of Client Solutions at Unchained Capital, and her expertise is relied on by executive teams and leadership forums and civic groups as they build their thesis on digital assets throughout the world. And then we have Matt Rosen. So Matt is the co-founder of Splinterlands, which is a digital card trading game. And so Matt has a breadth of knowledge not only on Bitcoin, but all the other technologies that you've been hearing about throughout the conference, from NFTs and Web3. So again, just a wealth of knowledge that we have here on the panel. So anyway, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a bit of a page out of Matt's book from this morning, where I'm going to start with a couple questions with the panel. But while I'm doing that, if you have specific questions that have come to mind as you've been hearing the great talks that we've had, please feel free to come up to the microphone here. So as we're answering these first few questions, we have people lined up. Because what I really want to do, the goal here, is to not kind of guess what you're thinking or what questions you have, but to actually hear what you guys are thinking, right, and what questions have been generated so far. So again, I'll start with a couple of questions, but please, if you have specific questions you want to ask, if you can start lining up at the microphone, that would be great. All right. So you've heard sound money talked about a lot, and just a little bit about myself. I had first heard about Bitcoin in 2012, but didn't really pay attention to it. And it wasn't until about 2016 that I really dug into it. But the reason, reflecting back, that I didn't pay attention to it was because I didn't understand the problem that it was fixing. And so we've heard a lot today about sound money. But what I wanted to start with is not everyone may know what sound money is, right? So I hear people all the time say, oh, well, whatever we designate as money is money. Right? So if we decide that hammers are money, it can be money. And so while that's true to some extent, there are certain laws of economics that are just natural. And so I thought maybe I would start with, like, what is sound money? What are some of the characteristics of sound money? And whoever wants to take that.
Bitcoin. No, really. It's the most sound money ever to be known by humans. It is a bearer instrument. Maybe you don't realize that. We think of it as this weird, intangible, cypherpunk. I'm not going to pick on you, like guys in a hoodie. We just, it doesn't seem real to us because we can't touch it. It's better than gold. It's the only way I can pick up and the value of every building in New York City and send it to a counterparty in Nigeria on a Sunday night. I can do that on the Bitcoin network. Moves instantly. It's inexpensive, if not free. Final settlement, no bank can say that.
I think I've heard Michael Saylor talk about it and say, you know, throughout history, we've taken things that already existed and tried to make them into money, and Bitcoin is engineered to be money. So, you know, in a way, it's created to have all the best characteristics, but it's also not something that a single entity still has, you know, control over and can, you know, change the characteristics over time, which, you know, is the detriment to all the users of that currency. So with Bitcoin, it's open source, it's transparent, everyone knows what they're running, and that makes it the most sound money.
Yeah, I'd say the main thing about sound money is how it's created or how you can get it. And I think of it like this: if, let's say, we use something as money, if there's some third party anywhere in the world that can somehow create that something that we use as money, let's say we just use gold as money, for an example. If someone could just create gold out of thin air as much as they wanted, they could come and they could use it to purchase things from us. We spend our time, we spend our energy producing things, food, housing, paintings, whatever it is. They can produce this stuff for free and trade it to us for our hard work. So that's in effect stealing, right? So that's what really happens, in my opinion, when you don't have sound money, is stealing. And that's what you know, a lot of people talk about the government, the US government does with their ability to print money. They take that money and they pay it to all of us and people around the world for our hard work and for our assets. And since it doesn't cost them anything to make, to create that money, they're stealing from us. So that to me is the definition of unsound money. And anything that does not work like that, anything where people can't just go and create it, is sound money.
Great, thank you. So along those same lines as stealing, and I know, you know, Mark touched on it in his talk, but just how the printing of money, and especially to the extent that we have, even just over the last couple of years, really affects the poor the most, right? And so I don't know if anyone here can speak about, like, why is that? Like, why and how does it affect poor the most, having such a, you know, inflated fiat currency?
Thank you, guys. Only like 20% of the people on Earth own assets, right? So when the government prints money and I own Apple stock or Amazon or a house in Malibu, the more money that goes into the system, the more my assets are worth. But if only 20% of the people own assets, that really leaves most of the world out of the equation, right? So to them, everything else just got more expensive.
Yeah, that's really all it is, right? Typically, the rich own more assets. They own more things that are more like sound money. So the government can print as much money as they want. It doesn't reduce the value of things like houses or gold or stocks or businesses or anything, but it reduces the value of money. And that means all the assets, when they're priced in that reduced value money, go up. So it hurts people who live paycheck to paycheck. It hurts people who, you know, have savings in dollars in the bank. And it in a lot of ways helps people that have hard money assets. It's called, I think the term is the Cantillon effect, really, for how that works.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And just as a reminder, especially if you came in late, what we would like is, if you have specific questions to ask, which I hope you do, if you could just start lining up at the microphone, because I'll be turning it over and really trying to answer what is on your mind after just a couple more questions here. So, and you know, because we have you know, the live stream and the videos, it's important to be at the microphone rather than just raise hands. Okay, so if you could line up, that'd be great. All right. So you know, in the Bitcoin space, there's definitely been a concerted effort to say there's Bitcoin and there's crypto, right? And so we're at a conference that is a really wide umbrella, which is great. It's fantastic. But could you guys explain some of the differences? Why is Bitcoin so much separate from crypto? And why is that effort underway of, okay, there's Bitcoin and there's crypto, really that designation between the two?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I first came into it, I kind of came from like a trading perspective. I just looked at them all like cryptocurrencies, and it took a little bit of time to peel back the layers and see what sets Bitcoin apart. I think it's even kind of more separate now that, you know, Ethereum's gone to proof of stake. Bitcoin's really like the one true proof of work, you know, cryptocurrency. So to me, that's kind of the value behind it is, you know, it's backed by real energy, real power. It's less manipulable. And, you know, it's not to say that, you know, I guess I still keep an open mind on what all the projects are trying to do, but to me, like Bitcoin, you have to put a little bit more energy and effort and into securing the network.
And you use a great term, proof of work. So could someone explain the difference between proof of work and proof of stake, which most other coins, a lot of coins are proof of stake. What's the difference between proof of work and proof of stake? Because I think that's an important concept for people to grasp.
Is that for me? Yeah. Proof of work is how Bitcoin and some other cryptocurrencies work, and it's where you have to do work. You have to expend energy in order to create the Bitcoins. Again, it kind of ties into what I mentioned earlier about, you know, how the money can be created, right? It doesn't just pop up out of thin air. You have to expend energy, and everyone equally in the world, you know, has the ability to expend energy or not. It's not like, you know, there's one government that has a monopoly on energy or anything like that. So it's fair, it's equitable, and that's the process that everyone has to go through in order to create the currency. Proof of stake is, you know, it's basically like coin voting. It's so everyone who has the currency can basically vote using their stake. The more you have, the more your vote counts, basically. It's sort of like, you know, the rich control the network in a lot of ways. And, you know, I think it's very similar to how companies are run. Shareholders vote to run companies. So it's a potentially useful concept, but it doesn't necessarily work well for being a sound money, as shareholders, the people who have the most of whatever token it is, they then have the ability to just create more of it out of thin air. No energy, no property of the universe is required to make it hard to create that currency.
Yeah, I would just add one thing. I mean, I'm a real advocate for Bitcoin, and I am very vocally against crypto just broadly. I think that it's extremely dangerous to our industry. I think that this debacle with FTX, obviously criminal, but it's going to set our industry back. It's going to set the adoption of Bitcoin back, although, you know, some would say it's like the best advertisement ever for Bitcoin, and not putting your trust in these crazy exchanges and air tokens and however else people are referring to these. You know, all money goes to one. The hardest money wins over years. We know that. You can look at the history of money and know that all money eventually goes to one. So when we attach crypto and currency, I think that people lose, you might get confused. It's easy to get confused and think that there will be a viable solution for more than one, and that is an incorrect assumption. There won't be. Are these things, as these guys have alluded to, are they interesting? Yeah, maybe. I mean, statistically, 70% of all of these tokens, there was a study, I think it was done in 2018, like 70% of these tokens did not have one digit of code that was written when they were launched. They were just marketing. It was gimmicks, right? It's garbage. We haven't really figured that out. Will there be interesting projects? Yeah, absolutely. But we need to consider them like we do technology stocks. And again, like statistically, we know that 80% of technology stocks don't survive. Technology companies broadly don't survive. Good ones do, ones that innovate, ones that make our life easier, ones that, you know, move us forward. But a bunch of guys sitting around telling you that this is going to change the world and this is going to change finance and this is going to change, you know, whatever, and you believing it, like, you kind of just deserve, I mean, people deserve what they get. If you're not willing to do work and take your energy and your money and really figure something out, if all you want to do is gamble, gamble. I mean, I'm wholeheartedly in favor of regulation, information dissemination on this topic. I think that regulated exchanges will do great things for Bitcoin broadly. But most of the things that are trading today are unregistered securities, and again, many of them don't have a drop behind them other than a team and a marketing group and a marketing budget, and maybe Andreessen Horowitz, who helps them propagate the whole thing forward.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we have a question.
Thank you. I really appreciate you taking my question. I think I read somewhere that Bitcoin has maybe been successfully upgraded around 20 times the software, what it means by successful is that the nodes that run Bitcoin all decided to go with that upgrade. How does an upgrade happen in Bitcoin? And then I think I read a blog that explained this to me well, but how does it not get upgraded to be a greater supply than 21 million ever? I'm sure you have an answer, but that's helpful. I don't know if this was the right place for that, but thank you.
No, absolutely. So there's kind of two different questions there, right? So how are upgrades determined and implemented? And then we'll tackle the second question about the supply. So I don't know who wants to talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, so that's a great question. It's things a lot of people don't realize. But at the core of it, since Bitcoin is a decentralized system, it's not like everyone's very used to there being some government or there's some company or whoever that decides these things, right? But in Bitcoin, it's everyone as a community participating to decide these things. And communities don't always agree. So anyone is able to go and change the code of Bitcoin. Most people don't realize that. The code is open source. You can download it and you can make changes. Now, if you do that, it would be what's called a fork. It would be separate. The people who run the current Bitcoin code would say, hey, your code that you just made is different, so they're not going to agree to it. But ultimately, it comes down to what the community as a whole, people around the world as a whole, decide to use. So there have been instances where some groups have said, we think Bitcoin would be better if we changed X, Y, or Z. They've put out new code. Some people have chosen to run that code instead, but typically it has not been anywhere close to the majority. So generally around the world, of everyone who participates in the Bitcoin network, they choose to continue to run basically the current code, and that current code includes the 21 million cap that you mentioned. So if I could go and change the code and change that cap, and I can put that out to the world, and it's ultimately up to everyone to decide, do they prefer that or do they prefer the original? So to me, it's ultimately, it's the ultimate version of consumer choice, really. Every possibility is available, and everyone can choose, what they want to use.
Yeah, I will just add to that. So if you think about it like Wikipedia, the code of Bitcoin, I could go and create my version of Wikipedia. I could just, copy the whole thing, drop it in, paste it. I call it Lisapedia. But to your point about the community decides, maybe I can convince a whole bunch of people to start using Lisapedia instead of Wikipedia. But there are all of the links to a lot of papers that we've written, papers other people have written, periodicals, whatever. They're in Wikipedia, right? So all of those links to the original Wikipedia are not going to change, right? So you've got that. And then you have okay, am I going to get people to come with me on my new Lisapedia? And I would, again, say to you, the network effects are the most powerful part of this network. And once the ball starts rolling, I would say it's impossible for it to stop. And if you look at Bitcoin Cash, which I think is a great example of this, some people decided they were going to change the size of the blocks and make some other changes. And I can't really speak technically to this, but they did. It's called Bitcoin Cash. The value of Bitcoin Cash is down 99% today against the value of Bitcoin. Community just didn't go for it. Some people are really still championing it. In Nevis St. Kitts last week, they adopted it as legal tender. I mean, there's 50,000 people that live there. It's like that made the news, and it's like, oh, well, Bitcoin Cash is going to take over. Guys, there's 50,000 people that live there. It's not taking over. The value of it's down 99% to Bitcoin.
You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it mostly covered it, but yeah, I mean, people are going to vote with their dollars, and I think, when I was first coming into it, I was looking at all the promises of, the different cryptocurrencies, and some of them are basically just forks of Bitcoin, like Litecoin changed, the block times and the total supply, things like that have been tinkered with, and sometimes it's confusing too, because when Bitcoin Cash came out, I think Bitcoin.com was actually supporting Bitcoin Cash, so people thought they were buying Bitcoin, but they weren't. And ultimately, you kind of just follow, how it develops, how it shakes out, and see what people are actually finding, more value in. And that was just mostly over, block size. And so, changing something like the supply of it, there would have to be a really compelling argument to do that, and it's purposely, pretty difficult process to change Bitcoin because you only want to do it if it's really necessary.
I also want to, you mentioned that there have been upgrades to Bitcoin, right? So depending upon what you mean, typically people might be able to change the code to make it more efficient, but it doesn't change how Bitcoin works, right? So it still works the same way, but it runs faster. It uses less energy. Fees are lower, things like that. So there have been a lot of those changes. And people don't, that's the whole idea, is you don't have to use those changes if you want. It might just, use more energy for you, or, things like that. So those type of upgrades do happen, and they're just really making the code and the system more efficient without changing anything about how it works.
And just one thing to add, anyone can run a Bitcoin node, and then you do have a vote in some of these changes. And I'll talk about this at the end, but I do have, you can ask me anything Bitcoin booth outside, and I have an example of a node that anyone can run for about $150 worth of hardware, and you can be part of the Bitcoin network, so it's very easy to run a node. So I'll just throw that in there. We have another question? Sorry, did we talk about the 21 million cap? We did a little bit, but yeah, why is the 21 million cap important not to change?
Well, the same reason I guess we talked about what is hard money, right? That's the whole point. If you just create more of it, it's the same thing as the dollar or any type of other things that can just be inflated. So I think that's something that the entire Bitcoin community holds as sacred as how Bitcoin works, and that's why it's extremely unlikely that anyone would seriously change that.
I was just wondering about your personal preferences for the best ways to acquire Bitcoin, like what kind of exchanges you use and also what kind of wallets. Like, I know a lot of people use Coinbase, which is how I started, and then I have like a cold card, CoinKite wallet, and I have a hot wallet too. But maybe you could just mention that for the newbies and also for me, for myself, and also recommending to other people. Thank you.
Great question. So there's tons of different ways. I don't know if you guys want to share some of your personal favorites.
And one more part of that is there a way to do it directly on the blockchain, like without an exchange? I'm not sure how that would work, or if that's possible.
Okay, great. Anyone want to?
Yeah, I'm a little biased on this. I work for River Financial, and we are a brokerage for Bitcoin only, so you can buy and sell Bitcoin on our platform. We are a custodian, so you can hold Bitcoin with us. I think we're a very trusted option, as we don't lend out our Bitcoin and try and sell you on, getting 8% back or whatever, like some of these exchanges have done. So we want our clients to feel safe with us, but we also are always educating our clients, trying to teach them that they can take full custody of their own Bitcoin and move it off our exchange. It doesn't impact our business when you take it off our exchange. But there is kind of a wide spectrum of people who use Bitcoin. So for some people, it might actually be less safe if they have to, remember they stored their password or what have you. So, I think there's a wide range of options, and maybe like first you want to hold it on an exchange, then as you get more comfortable moving it around, then maybe you take it into your own custody, and that might be a better option. It's kind of like, analogous to, holding gold at a bank, or if you actually feel safer having it in your home with you. I think it's a little bit easier to carry your Bitcoin around with you because you can essentially store it in your head if you decide to take full custody of it. So there's just a range of options depending on how comfortable you are with it. But there's certainly some exchanges that I think make it a little bit easier to get started.
If you'll forgive me, I'm going to shill my new company. I'm at a startup called Levelfield Financial. We are launching really any day now. We have a Buy Bitcoin platform, and we have just signed an LOI with a federally chartered bank. So our goal is to be able to provide you safe, secure ways to buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, and access financial services around Bitcoin in a regulated environment. So what that may not register if you're new to Bitcoin, and it probably doesn't register with you how important financial services around Bitcoin are, but for folks that have held Bitcoin since it was $1, maybe they bought it at $10,000, if they're storing a significant chunk of their net worth in Bitcoin and they don't want to sell it, they may want to use that as collateral against a loan. And so there are firms out there that offer financial services against Bitcoin. But again, I really would encourage folks to look at whoever it is that you are buying Bitcoin from and make sure that they're going to be a good steward of your dollars and your Bitcoin. And I would say that River is like hugely trusted by the Bitcoin community. They're loved by the Bitcoin community. So plug for River. They're awesome. I was going to add something else to that. I hate it when that happens.
Well, I'll go in if you remember.
Sorry?
I said I can go in if you remember. Feel free to jump in. Well, you also asked about, like, can it just be transferred? So ultimately, to get Bitcoin, someone has to transfer Bitcoin to you, right? So that's the only way it can happen. You can do that through a company like a Coinbase or River, any of these, or you can do it yourself. You can find someone, in the community or someone that you know, and you could have them transfer Bitcoin to you. You could sell your products or services. If you're a business, you could offer to have people pay you in Bitcoin. And so, to me, there are a lot of services that will hold your Bitcoin for you. A lot of them are actually trustworthy, despite the ones that blow up in the news. But to me, ultimately, the entire point of all this is that you can hold it yourself. So even if you don't feel comfortable holding a lot by yourself, which is totally understandable, I would highly encourage everyone here who's involved to try at least holding a small amount themselves, because that's what gives the government and financial institutions so much power, is that everyone is forced to hold all their assets with them. If you have to hold all your assets with banks, with brokerages, they have control over those assets. They can gamble them and lose them, which the banks have done, right? And the taxpayers had to bail them out. All these things, the government can say they don't like you because you've, talked bad about them or whatever. They can tell those institutions to freeze your funds. All sorts of things can happen. Bitcoin is the first thing that digitally, sure you can hold physical dollar bills or gold, but you have to secure it. But Bitcoin is the first thing that you can digitally hold yourself. You're not relying on any third party. No one can come take it away from you. No one can freeze your accounts. No one can go gamble it and say, sorry, it's gone. So I just highly encourage everyone to at least try to learn how to do that, which is a very small amount.
Yeah, I would say the more your knowledge grows on Bitcoin, the easier it will be for you to self-custody every bit of Bitcoin that you have. In fact, you will feel, you will sleep so well knowing that you've got it secured in what we call cold storage. It's basically securing your Bitcoin in a way that is not connected to any entity or the internet, right? Zero surface attack. I would say on the control front, this might be a great moment. I'm not sure if you're going to ask us about CBDCs, but you guys, those are very bad. We don't want those here, right? That's essentially a social credit score like they have in China. We don't want it. You ate too much beef this month. No more beef buying for you. You're using too much power. It is programmable money. It is a look at every dollar that you spend. There is no one in America that should feel like that's a great idea. Even if you think, I'm going to get my social benefits, whether it's Medicaid or Medicare or some sort of government subsidy. Oh, I'm going to get it faster. Like, that is a terrible narrative.
Yep. And just real quick, so as far as getting it directly from the blockchain, the really only way to do that would be to mine it yourself, which anyone can do. Anyone can run a miner at home, but you are getting the Bitcoin directly. It's fresh Bitcoin, never touched, and it's pristine Bitcoin is basically what it is, directly from the blockchain. Anyone can run a miner. I do have a miner also outside on the table if anyone wants to take a look at what it looks like. But I have friends who have heated their homes with the Bitcoin miner because it does generate a lot of heat. So you're heating your home and you're earning fresh Bitcoin as well. So mining is a good way to do that. And then just also real quick, the difference between wallets. So we talked about hot wallets and cold wallets, right? So hot wallets are on phones, and I know you asked for some favorites, so like Moon Wallet, Blue Wallet, things like that. And then cold storage is offline. So Ledger, Treasure are probably the two most popular cold storage options.
Yeah, real quick. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Anybody that wants to set up a Bitcoin wallet, come see me afterwards. It will take us 2 minutes, and I will send you Bitcoin, and you will understand the magic of this thing.
Yeah, and I know we're running a little bit short on time. We have about 8 minutes left, and I want to get to some questions. Again, I'll be at the Bitcoin meetup tonight, so we can continue to answer questions. I'll also be at the table the rest of the day and tomorrow as well to continue to answer questions. So.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe. I may be a bit of a dinosaur, but I would like to maybe take 5-10 years in the future and kind of tell me what this might look like to a person who makes 25 grand a year, 30 grand a year, minimum wage kind of worker in 5 to 10 years, maybe some of our kids in the future, that kind of thing. How might Bitcoin change the way they interact with the world in 5 to 10 years?
Okay, good question. Anyone want to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to look at it all across the world, and people are already using it today to send it cross borders with even like companies like Strike that make it really easy. People don't even really necessarily know that they're using Bitcoin. You can send dollars to pesos, and you're not losing a significant portion of that to transaction fees and going through all the banks in between. So I think that's an immediate way to make impact. And if you look at certain parts of the world as well, people just don't have access to banks. I think Mark Yusko was talking about that earlier today, that I think it's a third of the world is banked, and 2/3 have cell phones. So Bitcoin is a way that you can bank the unbanked and give people the same access to banking capabilities where maybe there is no brick and mortar place that they could even get to if they wanted to, or certainly not one that they could trust. So Bitcoin is kind of allowing you to bank yourself essentially.
Okay. Yep. All right.
Thank you. So I agree completely with Lisa's comments about central bank digital currencies, but I also tend to feel like that's probably an inevitability. And in a future world where, probably not too far in the future, where we have digital currencies, federal digital currencies, what does that look like for the adoption of Bitcoin in the mainstream? What does that look like for the trajectory of Bitcoin down the road? Thank you.
It's about your comment.
I think that the more people know about Bitcoin, the more they understand about Bitcoin, the more Bitcoin they'll hold, right? I interact in dollars. I keep some of my net worth in dollars. I believe in Bitcoin. I keep more of my net worth in Bitcoin. So I believe that shift is occurring. It's slow. I would hope that each of you leave here today, verify, don't trust. Don't listen to what we're saying. Believe everything we've just said to you is a lie. But listen to yourself and say, you know what, this is really, really interesting. I need to go learn more. Do your homework. Go out there and understand how it works. There's lots of great books. There's great YouTubes. Just figure it out. And again, I just think that the knowledge distribution is where we see adoption rate, and it's where we see security for all of our energy and all of our net worth going forward.
Thanks for the time and the good discussion. My name is John. I'll keep it brief just in the interest of time and let other people ask questions. What's your opinion on something like El Salvador, where it's just kind of like that, they just decided that we're just going to mass adopt and everywhere has to accept it by law? What do you think, and how is that obviously not really applicable to a country with 400 million people in it, but that attitude of just saying, now's the time we're going to make the change, and now they own like 18,000 Bitcoins in their treasury of their country. So how does that kind of translate into what the future is going to look like 5-10 years down the line, especially as you just mentioned, the inevitability of digital federal currencies?
Okay. Anyone? Matt?
I think it was an incredibly brilliant move, and they will go down in history, and their president, as innovators and ahead of their time. Bitcoin is very game theory based. So El Salvador was sort of in a situation that a lot of like poor people are. They were oppressed by the U.S. and other organizations like the IMF around the world, and they correctly identified Bitcoin as the answer, as the way out, as the way to take control of their economic freedom themselves. And it's also, there's a lot of game theory involved. So, being the first provides the most benefits. It's also the riskiest, right? They're taking the brunt of the criticisms. So it's not easy to be the first. But I think they correctly identified, like, this is the way that poor countries, just like poor people, can fight back against this oppressive system.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
Hi, my name's Joe. My question is about a future where Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies become more of a active part of people's daily economic lives. Do you foresee a future where governments or different organizations kind of require more know your client or wallet identification that sort of begins to dilute one of the most attractive things about Bitcoin, which is privacy, kind of making it a moot point in a sense that, what's the point of having this untouchable money if they can still see what you have and, come to your house afterward. So what are your thoughts on just wallet identification in the coming years?
Great.
Yeah, I think institutions like something like River Financial are certainly going to have to comply with KYC, AML, and those standards, and it obviously depends on where you live. That gives you certain benefits, like we can help you with certain things like setting up multi-signature wallets, or helping you to pass off to beneficiaries in the years to come. But you're still empowered to basically bank yourself and go outside of that, and no one can really take that from you. So there's different uses depending on like what you're looking for, I guess. So I think maybe that's kind of where I see two different avenues to go, where you're really just like holding it yourself, and kind of you're going to have to dive in and get really knowledgeable on what you're doing. Or if you just want to hand your Bitcoin over to someone who you trust more, then that's kind of what you're going to be sacrificing a little bit.
Yep. And I think there are a lot of ways to increase your privacy with Bitcoin. It's a way bigger topic than what we can cover here. But there's plenty of information out there that you can find about being more private with your Bitcoin.
Hi, my name is Brandon, and my question is, so the price of Bitcoin, it feels like over the past, since we've had our bullish phase and now we're in the bearish phase, it seems as though it's really hinged on global markets collectively, unfortunately, and obviously we're looking at Bitcoin as an alternative to the dollar, and we're still sometimes limited in that scope with the price of it. And how much of that could be related in our bearish cycle to all the algorithmic stablecoins and leverage that was used to purchase Bitcoin by these projects that weren't necessarily as safe as people thought they were? Just something I figured I'd ask.
Okay. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think in my head. Sorry.
It just feels as though Bitcoin has kind of gone with the way the market conditions have gone on a global perspective, and it feels like people went into crypto to avoid that, and it's as if it's gotten hinged to it to a certain extent, which would be expected as like currencies get debased and the quality of money as a whole gets destabilized. But Bitcoin as a safe haven has also seemed to go with the flow with that as well, and people that did buy on the highs now obviously losing their investments that they applied to it, just how that affects the market and just how to get people juiced up for these bargain prices right now. It just feels as though the sentiment isn't what it once was.
Right, so there's a lot of correlation,
Yeah.
right, in the markets. I know, Lisa, you got this question next door as well. And so it's a common question for sure.
The one thing I definitely hear lots of questions and lots of talk about price. I generally think that's the wrong way to look at it. I don't personally look at Bitcoin as like how I'm going to make more dollars, right? That's just, there are lots of financial assets. The price is going to go up, it's going to go down. I mean, ultimately, it's based on people. Economics is, based on people, was talked about, I think, earlier, and what they do. So people are scared they're going to sell things, whether it's Bitcoin or whatever. And so the price is going to be all over the place. It's going to be affected by all sorts of other things that happen, scams, frauds, governments, whatever, markets. But I would also encourage people to look at the 4-year average price of Bitcoin. So if you're really into Bitcoin, you understand this, and you understand the reasons for it. It's not a day trading type of thing, or a month trading, or a year trading. It's how you preserve value over the long term. And when you look over a long-term chart, you see all that goes away. So that's how I look at it. It's how can I accumulate more of this asset to preserve my wealth over a long term.
I'll give you one quick example. So yesterday I got a really panicked phone call from a client at my former company, Unchained Capital. So what Unchained does is they help people hold their own private keys to Bitcoin. So I get a call from a client. He's like, oh my God, I hate to tell you this, but I have Bitcoin on Coinbase, and I have to get it off because Coinbase is probably going bankrupt and they're going to zero, and I got to get my Bitcoin off. I should have done this a long time ago. You were right. So we get that done. And I said, well, if memory serves, you're about to be in your off season, because he waits tables down in Florida at this beautiful resort. And I said, are you just going to kick back this year? And, where are you going? And he said, no. He goes, that was my life before Bitcoin, but now I'm in Bitcoin. There's no off season. I'm getting 2 more jobs while that restaurant's closed. Right? So to this point, like, when you understand the value of Bitcoin, you're not denominating it in dollars. You're like, how much can I get? How fast can I get it? Like, how steadily can I just make this happen? And if you're like me, I'm like, I'm selling my second car. Bitcoin's trading 16,000. Are you freaking kidding me? I'm looking at my car going, I'm not going to pay that insurance. I can take all that money and plow it into Bitcoin. I mean, I know it's a little crazy, but we kid about selling chairs.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Bitcoin's still in its infancy. So, the waves, come and go. And it seems like, even if you are looking at price, like, the highs are higher and the lows are lower. Like, if you go back to the beginning of COVID, the last time there was, a lot of panic, I think Bitcoin went all the way down to like $3,000. So, it seems like, we've been doing nothing but going down for several months now in price, but, each time more people are seeing the value of that. There's different stories of, whether it's, people getting out of Afghanistan and now they're able to retain their wealth because they had it in Bitcoin as opposed to a bank that was, going to confiscate it from them. So, each time as it lives on, it's going to develop more inertia. And, I think there will be less volatility over time, but right now you got to understand that it's 10, 12 years old and trying to be, a worldwide currency. So it's going to have those pretty violent ebbs and flows in the beginning.
Right. And I know we're out of time, so maybe we can follow up with you right afterwards. Just my own personal comment, to the last question is that my personal opinion is that Wall Street and traders still treat Bitcoin very much like a tech stock, right? Like, they're in it purely for trade. Like, they're not into the ethos of Bitcoin, of sound money and the different things that it can bring the world. They're in it to make more fiat money, right? And so they trade it like a tech stock. They trade on people's fears. The collapse of FTX last week, obviously had an effect on the price, but nothing fundamentally changed about Bitcoin. Bitcoin still cranked out a new block every 10 minutes. Nothing fundamentally changed, but people are trading on what they know is going to be the fear in the market. So I think that's a big part of the correlation, but more and more as we see the effects of fiat and the more money printing, it's just going to naturally decouple eventually. When that's going to happen, who knows? But yeah, so we are out of time. I know there might be a couple questions. I'm more than happy to answer a few here. Like I said, I'll also be at the Bitcoin booth right outside. And I have different things on display, hardware wallets, a node, a Bitcoin miner, if people actually want to see and talk about that a little bit more. And we have a Bitcoin meetup later tonight. So thank you very much.
Oh, come see me if you want to set up a Moon wallet. I'll help you. I'll send you Bitcoin.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for your speech. Thank you for your questions. And yeah, we'll continue the conversation.